We begin today the Gemara on Daf Lamed Gimel, one line down from the top of the Yomit. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah, Dine Momenes Machzirin Cholum. The Mishnah says when it comes to money matters, if a mistake was made in the verdict, whether it was innocence or guilt, either way, by Dine Momenes, the Psak Din is turned back because of the mistake. Ramino, so the Gemara says, I'll ask a contradiction from what it says in the following Mishnah. Donas Adin, a judge, Paskin a halacha din, Zika Sachayev, in a case where someone that was supposed to be guilty, he made him innocent, or the opposite, Chiyev is a Zakai, someone that was supposed to be innocent, he made him guilty. Or Times Sator, something that was supposed to be Tor, pure, he said that it's impure. Or the opposite here is Satame. So in all these cases, Masha Asa Asi, the Psak Din, the verdict is done. You don't turn it back. And then the Yishalom Yibeisai. This judge is going to have to pay for whatever loss was caused by his Psak Din. So we clearly see here that once Bezdin Paskind, it's an effect. You don't change it. So how could the Mishnah say that by Dinei Mammon is Machzirin, we go back on the Psak Din? Okay, so the Gemara is going to bring a number of answers, 3 or 4 answers on this contradiction. Rav Yosef says, Lo kashya, it's not a contradiction. Kan b'mumche. In the case of our Mishnah, we're talking about an expert judge. And the mumche we're talking about over here, Taisva says, is a judge, a dayan that has proper smicha. So in such a case, if the judge says he made a mistake and he wants to turn over the verdict, we can trust him. You can't argue with him and say, well, maybe now you're making a mistake. Who says before you made a mistake? Since he's an expert, so if he's telling you he made a mistake, we know he made a mistake. So therefore, machzirim, we turn over the ruling. However, in the Mishnah over there, this is a Mishnah in Bechairis, so that's a case where it's not an expert. So in such a case, how could he turn over the original verdict? If he's going to say now that he made a mistake before, how can we trust him? Maybe now he's making a mistake. So the Gemara asks on this, how could you give such an answer? You're telling me that if he's an expert judge, and in such a case, our Mishnah is telling us that you go back on the verdict. But Vakatani, the Mishnah there in Bechairis goes on to say that if this is a person that is a mumche for a bezdin, so then when the ruling that he said was a mistake, so whatever he said stays in place, and not only that, patim l'shalom, he's going to be exempt of paying for his mistake. So that Mishnah there clearly says that by a mumche, actually we say not only the verdict stays in effect, but he doesn't even have to pay. He doesn't even have to reimburse for the mistake that he made. And Rashi here says the reason for this is because in such a case we say that it's the bad luck of this person that lost out from this mistaken ruling. It's not the fault of the judge. Very interesting concept. Because since this person is a dayan, a mumche, it doesn't make sense that he made a mistake. How could he make a mistake like this? So it must be that the only reason he made this mistake is not because of him, it's because of the bad luck of this person. So you're not the cause of this. It's his bad luck, so you don't have to reimburse him. That's Rashi's pshat. There are other Rishonim that say that the pshat on this is, if you're a dayan mumche and you make a mistake in a judgment, it's an oinus. It must have been something that was out of your control that caused this mistake, because the person that's a mumche does not make a mistake. So therefore you're going to be potter to pay. Either way, the point is we see over here that even regarding a mumche, from the Mishnah in Bechairis, we see it says that once the verdict was said, it's in effect and you don't go back on it. So therefore the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman explains, Kan sheyesh godle mena b'chachma b'minyan. In our Mishnah, the reason we're going back on the verdict is because there's someone else here that's greater than you in wisdom and in minyan, in number, which means either that he's someone that's older than you, or it means that it's someone that is greater, he has more students that he teaches, and therefore in such a case, we go back on the verdict. Kan she'en godle mena b'chachma b'minyan. And in the Mishnah in Bechairis where it says that you don't go back is because there's nobody that's greater here in wisdom or with the numbers or whether his age or students, and therefore we don't trust that the previous Psak Din was wrong because there's no one else now that's greater that's telling you definitely that Psak Din was wrong, so we don't go back on the Psak Din. Another answer, Rav Sheshes explains, Kan Shato B'dvar Mishnah, that in a case where a person makes a mistake, and it's a clear Dvar Mishnah, it's a clear Mishnah that says not like what he paskin. So in such a case, his verdict is not a verdict at all. So you have to go back on it. That's what our Mishnah is talking about here. Kan shato b'shikol adas. Over here, in the Mishnah in Bechairis, where it says that the verdict does not, the verdict does go back, Again, sorry, the Mishnah B'chayres that says that the verdict does not go back, it's because the mistake that was made is in shikol hadas, which means in assessing the matter properly or in evaluating the matter properly. In such a thing regarding shikol hadas, the verdict does not go back. Now the Gemara is soon going to explain what exactly shikol hadas means. Rav Sheshes said in the name of Ravasi, Tob Dvar Mishnah, when a person makes a mistake regarding something which is clear in the Mishnah, chayzer. So the mistake, you always go back on this. Tob Shikol hadas. But if the mistake is only regarding assessment, ein a chayzer. This is something that the psak din, once it's said, it's in effect, and you don't go back on it, even if it turns out that its shikol hadas was wrong. So now what are we talking about over here? So first the Gemara clarifies what's included in Dvar Mishnah. So Ravina said to Ravashi, when it said Dvar Mishnah means a Mishnah from the Mishnayos. But would it also include from the Tosefta, from the Braises that Rav Chia and Ravashi put together? So they were not as clear and as strong as the Mishnayos that everybody knew about. Right? And they were more medactic with them. So the question is whether Brais is included in this as well. Amalei in. So Ravashi said yes, even regarding a clear Tosefta, if there was a mistake, then he goes back on the Psak Din. Further, he asked him, Afilu b'derav Shmuel, if it's a statement that Rav or Shmuel said, and he made a mistake and he did different than them, is it also considered to be like a Dvar Mishnah, meaning it's a clear statement, and therefore you're going to be chayzer? Amalei in. So he said yes, that's included as well. And then Ravina asked Ravashi further, and even if it's a statement that either myself or you, if we said regarding a certain subject and someone paskin against this, it's also called a Torah B'dvar Mishnah. Ravina and Ravashi were from the last Amiroim. They were the ones that were Masad with the Gemara. So even something like from us, from the very last Amiroim, would it also be considered to be a Torah B'dvar Mishnah? Amalei, so Ravashi said, yes, Otuanan, Katli Kani Bagmanan. Are we just people that sit and can cut reeds in the swamp? Or Ashi says, we gather pieces of wood. Who are we? We are nobody. The statements that we say in halacha is also very strong, and if someone paskin is different than us, then the psak din is going to go back. Now, the Mefarshim, the Rishayim here do point out that what the Gemara is discussing over here must be referring to a situation where, because the question is, we're talking about in the time of Damiroim. In the time of Damiroim, they're discussing this. In their time, there can't be another Amayra that could argue with them. So why is it considered to be a Torah B'dvar Mishnah that's chayzer? He's able to argue. So the answer is, if this is an Amayra that paskin, and he didn't know that Ravina and Ravashi said this, he wasn't even aware that Ravina and Ravashi said different than him, then the fact that you don't know that great people like Ravina and Ravashi, even though you could argue with them, but you paskin not knowing that they say different, in such a case it's considered to be Torah B'dvar Mishnah. But an Amayra that knows what Ravina and Ravashi said, and he argues, and he has a different opinion, and therefore he's paskening differently, that's not called a Torah B'dvar Mishnah. You have the ability to argue on them. That's the pshat in the Gemara over here. We're going to get to the Zman of the Amiraim itself. But from this Gemara, we see the concept that Talmud, after the Gemara was finished through Ravina and Ravashi, someone that argues on anything that says in the Gemara, it's a Torah B'dvar Mishnah. And the same thing the Paiskim says, when you get to a halacha, a clear halacha in Shulchan Aruch, that Shulchan Aruch is also considered to be a Torah B'dvar Mishnah, and therefore you'll be chayzer. What's the halacha of shikol hadas? What's the example of shikol hadas? So the Gemara explains. Where am I over here? Shikol hadas. Heichidami, that is. Heichidami shikol hadas. What's this example of something that's just an assessment, and therefore we say that if you made a mistake, then you will not be chayzer for this. Rav Papa said, a case of either two Tanoim or two Ameram that argue about a subject. And it's a case where there was no final ruling regarding this. We paskin like one or the other. And it happened that this judge paskin like one opinion. So why is it wrong? If there was no psak din one way or another, so what's wrong about this? Because v'sugi d'shmaita ozli ki idach. So, but most judges paskin like the other opinions. Even though there was no actual psak din that was given in this case, but because most of the judges paskin like the other way, so then he should have paskin that way, and it's considered to be a mistake that you'd have to be chayzer. It's considered to be a mistake. It's a mistake of shikol hadas, where in such a case you're not chayzer. It's not chayzer from the. It's a mistake because you should have paskin like the way everyone paskins, but you're not chayzer for this. Okay. Again, this is considered to be a mistake in something which is shikul adas, where you should have had the proper assessment to find out what most judges paskin in this machlekes. Okay, so Rav Mamnuna asks, and Rav Shesh's answer. So what was the basis of Rav Shesh's answer? That when it comes to a dvar mishnah, in such a case, he made a mistake, definitely we go back on the psak din. And that's what our Mishnah was speaking about when it said machzirin. So we asked him from what it says, Maise, there was a story, I think this is also a Mishnah, in Masechta Bechayris. Maise beparish al Beis Menachem. There was a story with a cow, which was in Beis Menachem. In the Mishnah in Bechayris, there does not say Beis Menachem, therefore some take it out. Shenitla eim shelo. The womb of this cow was removed. So the question is, if it's still kosher or not. Is it an animal that could live for 12 months? Is it kosher or not? Or is it considered to be a treifa? V'hechila Rav Tarfon leklovim, Rav Tarfon paskin, because it doesn't have its womb, so therefore it's treif, and therefore because of this, they gave it to eat to the dogs. Now after this, the story came in front of the Chachamim b'Yavne, and Yavne v'etirua, and the Chachamim were matter this. They said that it is kosher, and the reason is, Bach adds, because Tudus, a doctor, he said the following to prove that a cow that doesn't have a womb could live and is still healthy. Whether a cow or a swine would not go out from Alexandria and Mitzrayim, unless they cut out its womb. Because they didn't want that this cow or swine coming out of Alexandria of Mitzrayim should give birth. The reason is because they had very good and special quality animals, and they wanted that it should remain only in Mitzrayim, so that anyone needs to buy should have to come to them. So if there would be this animal that would leave Mitzrayim, they would cut out its womb, so it shouldn't give birth elsewhere. So what do you see from this? That even after you cut out its womb, it's still able to live. So from here is a raya that it's not a treifa. Comes out that Rav Tarfon paskined wrong, and because of this, he caused the loss that they gave this para to eat to the dogs. So now Rav Tarfon said, after he heard that he paskined wrong, there goes your donkey, Tarfon. Speaking to himself, he said, well, I'm going to have to now reimburse for the loss that I caused by my psak din, so I'm going to have to sell my donkey to have money to reimburse. Amalei Rabbi Akiva, so Rabbi Akiva tells him, Paterata. No, you're pater from reimbursing for your mistake. Why? Because what we learned before, it says in the Mishnah in Bechayris, Shekol ha-mumche lebezdin, the Bachir has, Shekol ha-mumche lebezdin, pater melashalim. Any expert judge in a bezdin, and that makes a mistake, he's pater to pay. As I mentioned before, Rashi says the pshat is considered to be the bad luck of the person that had this loss, it's not the mumche's fault. That's, so Rabbi Akiva explained to him, that's why he's going to be pater. There's the Mishnah in Bechayris. So now the Gemara says, this is what Rav Mamnuna asked now. If what Rav Sheshes said is true, that anytime you toya in a dvar Mishnah, the psak din, it does not hold. You go back on it. If so, lemile, so Rabbi Akiva should have told Rav Tarfon, don't worry, you're not responsible to reimburse because toya b'dvar Mishnah ata. V'toya b'dvar Mishnah chayzer. You made a mistake in a dvar Mishnah, and if you make a mistake in a dvar Mishnah, so then you can go back on it. So therefore, in this case, even though you paskin that it's treifa, you can go back on it. So therefore, you're not going to be responsible to pay. Now, the Gemara is soon going to ask the obvious question on this. The loss is done already. It was already given to eat to the dogs. So whether it could go back in it or not, but now it's too late. The loss is caused already. Okay, the Gemara will soon address that. But meanwhile, the Gemara answers to Rav Amnuna's question that you're right. Chada v'oid ka'omar. When Rabbi Akiva told Rav Tarfon that don't worry, you're not going to have to pay, he was telling him an additional point, but you're right, there's really one more point, like you said over here, that he could have told him that he won't be responsible. The first reason why he wouldn't be responsible is the Toiv Dvar Mishnah, because there was a mistake in a clear Dvar Mishnah. Now Rashi here brings, what's the clear Dvar Mishnah? I forgot to mention before. Rashi says the Dvar Mishnah in this case is that there's a Mishnah, a Masechta Chulin, there's a clear Mishnah, Nitlo ha'em shalak sheira, that if the womb is removed, then it's kosher. That's how Rashi learns a pshat on this. The Shach, though, doesn't learn this way, because the Shach says he says, look in the story here, it says that the Chachamim came, and the Chachamim were matter this tereifa, and they said the reason is because Tudos, a doctor, said, Benigeya to the cows or the animals that come out of Mitzrayim. Why is he bringing the proof from the doctor that comes out of Mitzrayim? It's a clear Mishnah in Masechta Chulin. So the Shach says an interesting thing, that from this Gemara you learn that Tov Dvar Mishnah also includes if a judge makes a mistake regarding something which is factually wrong. Like over here, It's not mitzad the Mishnah in Bechayres. Could be in the time of Rab Tarfon, that Mishnah wasn't learned yet, or wasn't was before that Mishnah was established yet. So what was the Torah B'dvar Mishnah? If a doctor said that Pashat mitzad the health, the fact is that this animal could still live, and you made a mistake and you assessed the mitzias wrong, the fact wrong, that's also called a Torah B'dvar Mishnah. Okay, so that's the first point here, that Rabbi Akiva could tell him that it's Torah B'dvar Mishnata, V'toyi B'dvar Mishnah Chayzer, and therefore the verdict that you said, the psak din, that it's treif, you go back on it, and you can say afterwards that it's kosher. So there's no loss that you're causing. Additionally, even if you did make a mistake regarding something which is totally, it depends on your assessment, and therefore this is something that you can't go back on your psak din, so you caused the loss, but still you don't have to pay, because mumche l'rabim or mumche lebezdin ata, you're a mumche of a bezdin, v'chol mumche lebezdin patim l'shalem. If you're a judge and you're an expert judge in a bezdin, you make a mistake, the rule is you don't have to pay, so therefore you'll be pater. Okay, so now, but here the Gemara goes back to address what's this whole discussion over here. What was this question of Rav Amnuneh, and we're discussing about Torah B'dvar Mishnah? It's irrelevant. Over here, the animal was already thrown to the dogs. So whether you can go back or not, the fact is the loss already happened. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Rava. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak asks Rava, "Mai kamaisav Rav Amnuneh l'Rav Sheshes?" Why is it Rav Amnuneh even asking a question from this Mishnah on Rav Sheshes regarding the case of, or the concept of Torah B'dvar Mishnah? Mi para. Why is he asking from this Mishnah about this cow that the womb is removed? This cow was already given to eat to the dog, so it's not here that you can go back on it. So why is he asking Rav Sheshes that if what you say is true, that you could go back on a case of Torah B'dvar Mishnah, so then Rabbi Akiva should have told Rav Tarfon, don't worry, you can go back on your psak din. What do you mean go back? He already gave it to eat to the dogs, so the loss is caused already. So he should be chayiv to pay. That's why you have to give him a different reason why he's pater to pay, because he's a mumche. Okay, so the Gemara explains, no, it's not so simple. Hachika malei, this is what Rav Amnuneh was saying to Rav Sheshes. If you're going to say that when a person made a mistake, even regarding a Dvar Mishnah, but nevertheless, once the psak din is ruled, ein a chayzer, you don't go back on that. Then I could say, alma, so from this I see, kam dina, that once the halacha is paskin, the halacha is established, and you can't change it. So Hainu, the Kamafchad Rab Tarfon, this is the reason why Rab Tarfon was afraid, and he's going to be, because it's going to be his responsibility, because he gave a psak din that this animal is treif, and they gave it to eat to the dogs, and he caused this, you can't go back on this psak din, so he caused the loss, so he's going to have to pay. And then we can understand that the only way we could explain why would you pater to pay is what Rabbi Akiva said. Rabbi Akiva told him, Mumche lebezdin ata, you're a mumche, v'ata patel mishlam, and therefore you're exempt from paying. However, but if you're going to say that when one makes a mistake regarding a Dvar Mishnah, so really this kind of a psak din is not a ruling at all. Emesis is a total mistake, and when you find out this mistake, you should just go back on it. You undo this psak din. If so, lay malay, so Rab Tarfon, or rather Rabbi Akiva that is, should explain Rab Tarfon, don't worry about your mistake. Kiva the ilu avoy para. If that cow would still be here, if it wouldn't have been given to eat to the dogs, dinach lav dina, your judgment, your ruling was not even a ruling at all. It was against the Mishnah, v'lei klum of this, and therefore you've done nothing. You've done nothing wrong because the psak din that you gave wasn't wrong at all, and they didn't give the cow to eat yet to any of the dogs, so you can just go back on it. So hashtanami, even now, if they gave it to eat to the dogs, loy klum of this. What you have done is not you've done nothing wrong, because the psak din that you gave wasn't really a psak din. The fact that the owner of this cow then went and because of your psak din and gave it to eat to the dogs, that's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. It's the owner that went ahead and did it. Your psak din was really not a psak din at all. The owner went and gave it to the dogs, so that's he did it to himself, and therefore you're not going to be responsible for that. Now, what's the hesber at this point that the Gemara is saying here now? And at the end of the day, it was your psak din that caused that this owner should go and throw his dog throw the cow to the dogs to eat. So what do you mean you didn't do it? Of course you did it. So there's a big discussion in the Rishonim about this, and the basis of the understanding of the Gemara is the concept of grama. A grama b'nizaken is pater. And therefore we say, if your psak din is a psak din that you can't go back on, and because of that, the owner went and threw it to the dogs, so in such a case, you're not a grama. Your psak din is the final psak din, kam din, you can't go back on it, so that's it. So you can give it to the dogs. You directly are causing this damage. There's no way to go back on this. Now it's treif. However, if really the psaktin, which is a mistake, because it's a Tov Dvar Mishnah, you could go back on it. So really, you were not supposed to keep this psaktin. Elamai, because you gave this mistaken psaktin, that caused the owner to be under this mistaken impression, and he went and gave it to the dogs. That's what's called a grama. And therefore, in a case of grama, you're going to be poter. Now, furthermore, the Rishonim add to this that this is really not just a regular kind of grama. This is what's called garmi. Garmi means when it's different Pirushim and Rishonim what garmi means, but garmi is when you're causing something in a pretty direct manner. This kind of psak din is very directly causing this person to go and do what he did, to give it to the dogs. So there's actually machlokes that's brought in Shas all the time between Chachamim and Rab Meir regarding garmi, whether in a case where you cause a very directly cause a damage, whether you're going to be chayav or potter. According to Rab Meir, in the case of garmi, you're going to be chayav. So it has to be that this Gemara here is going according to the opinion that says that garmi is potter. And therefore, since you say Tov B'Dvar Mishnah is chayzer, and your psak din really wasn't a psak din, so you can't consider it to be a direct damage that you did, be a dayan mamish, that mamish your psak din caused the damage. It's a garmi, it's pretty direct, but you didn't do it, so therefore you're going to be potter. That was the question of Rav Amnuna on Rav Sheishes, that if you say Tov B'Dvar Mishnah is chayzer, so then Rabbi Akiva could have given him this reason, that you're only garmi, and you would have still been potter. That's the Piddush that it says in most Rishonim over here. Taisus brings it up also. Sugi dehacha asi karabanon. That has to be only according to the Chachamim that say that garmi is still going to be potter. Okay, so Gemara weiter. This is all. We're in the middle over here of explaining to answer the contradiction of our Mishnah that says you go back on a psak din to the Mishnah in Bechayris that says you don't go back on a psak din. So Rav Chisda Omar, now the Gemara brings another answer for that contradiction. Rav Chisda says, Kan, in the Mishnah in Bechayris, where it says that you don't go back on the psak din, shenotal v'nosam biyad. It's because the Bezdin, paskin, they didn't only paskin, the Bezdin themselves went with their hands and took the money from one person and gave it to the other. If Bezdin goes and does that with their own hand, it gives a very big strength to the psak din, that this is something we don't go back on. Now, whether you're going to be responsible to reimburse for the loss or not, that's another story. That depends if you're a mumcha or not. But once Bezdin does something by hand, that gives it a take if you don't go back on that. That's in the Mishnah in Bechayris. Over here, when it says machzirin, it's because Bezdin paskin, but it was only a verdict. But Bezdin didn't by hand mamish go and take the money out from one and give it to the other. In such a case, the psak din is just words, and therefore you can go back on it. Okay, so now the Gemara will assess this answer and see if it fits into the Mishnah of Bechayris and whether it fits into our Mishnah. So first the Gemara starts with the Mishnah in Bechayris. It says the Gemara, what does it say there now? It's understood in a case where someone that was supposed to be innocent, so you said that he's guilty and he has to pay. So that's understood what you mean, that over there, Bezdin went with their hands and took the money away from him. So Bezdin went and took the money from this person and gave it to someone else. They made him chayiv even though he was supposed to be potter. But if the case over here is like the Mishnah that goes on to say, that the Bezdin pattered someone that should have been chayiv to pay. What does it mean that Bezdin took money by hand? They didn't take any money, they just said the guy is potter. So they didn't move anything by hand. So why are we saying that over there you're not chayzer on this psak din? Says the Gemara, the amalei potterata. Sorry, this is part of the question. The only thing that they're saying to this person is that you're potter. That's it. It's just words. So they didn't take any money by hand. So the Gemara says, no, kivin the ama potterata. In such a case, when you're saying that someone is innocent and he doesn't have to pay, that's equivalent to taking money by hand from one person to another. But because by Bezdin saying that, they're directly putting the money and leaving the money in his possession, no different than the Bezdin taking the money by hand out of him. And therefore it's considered to be equivalent to that. Huh? No, it's not. It's a garmi over there. Someone else went and did it based on this plan. That's a different thing. Over here, when Bezdin says potter, it's like Bezdin is putting the money in his hands. So therefore, he's going to be. We say that the ruling stays in effect. Okay, so that's the pshat in the Mishnah in Bechayris. Now the Gemara comes back to our Mishnah. What did we say? What's our Mishnah talking about? When it says in our Mishnah that you don't go back on, our Mishnah says that you do go back on the psak din. So the case of here is that Bezdin did not take the money with their hands. They just paskined with words. Now, Elamas Nisen, but in our Mishnah, Diktani Dine Mamanis Machzirim, Bein L'Schos Bein L'Chayva. Our Mishnah says that when it comes to money matters, you can go back on the Psak Din, whether it's L'Schos, whether it's L'Chayva. Now you want to say that the person is innocent, you want to say now change and say that the person now is guilty, you can always go back. So how do we understand this? The fact that you're saying that you can go back and you want to say that now he's innocent and before you said he was guilty, so that we can understand. The case is the originally the Bezdin said that this person is chayiv to pay, and the Bezdin did not go with their hands and take the money from him and give it to the other person. They just paskin. And now Bezdin is saying that he's really innocent, and therefore the money has to go back. So in such a case, the reason why we're chayzer is because Bezdin by hand didn't go and do anything. But if the case over here is that Bezdin wants to switch now from this that they said before that he's innocent and he's potter, and now they want to switch and say that he's guilty and he's chayiv. So what's the case? The originally they told this person that you're potter, and now they want to switch and say that he's really guilty and he's really chayev. But if that's the pshat in our Mishnah, but we said before, kivin the amale patata, if you paskin for a person that he's potter, that's equivalent to taking the money with your hands from one to another. When you say potter, that's establishing the money in his possession, and that's considered to be like you put the money there, and therefore you can't go back on such a kind of psak din. So how in our Mishnah, according to the pshat of Rav Chisda, is it saying that you could go back on that psak din? So the Gemara says, we're going to have to switch the pshat in our Mishnah and say, Chada Katani. When it says in our Mishnah that by dinim mamanis you can go back whether you want to make him guilty now, whether you want to make him innocent now, it sounds like the Mishnah is saying two different points. But really, the Mishnah is saying one point. And that is as follows. Dinim mamanis, by the case of dinim mamanis, machzirin lizuchus. You can go back now and say that now he's innocent. Meaning before you said he's guilty, which means he had to pay. And the Bezdin went and did not take the money by hand. The Bezdin did not take the money by hand, and now you want to say that he's going to be innocent. So that you could do. Now, when it says in the Mishnah Chayva, it goes together. Luzuchos, for this person, you want to go back on the Psak Din for him and make him innocent now, Shehi Chayva. And that's going to be something which is going to be a Chayva for the other person. In other words, the other person is going to lose out. In every Din Taira, by Dinim Mamanis, whatever is going to be in favor for one is considered to be negative for the other. So when it says in the Mishnah Chus and Chayva, it really is talking about one case, where originally they made this person guilty, and the Bezdin did not take by hand money out, therefore it was just words, and now when they want to make this person innocent, because it was just words before, therefore the Bezdin can go back on the Psak Din. But if it would have been the opposite, so the Gemara already said before, if it would have been a case where originally they made this person potter, just saying potter is equivalent to taking the money by hands, you can't switch that Psak Din now. So our Mishnah is only talking about a case where originally the psak din that the person was actually chayiv and they did not take it by hand. Okay, that's the pshat by dinim mamanis. So the Gemara goes further. So if so, based on this, the chvasa gabe nefashis. Now, if that's how you understand the statement in the Mishnah by dinim mamanis, you're going to have to explain similar also by the statement of the Mishnah when it talks about a judgment regarding life or death. Over there, what does the Mishnah say? There, the Mishnah says that for zuchos, if you want to now switch to say that he's innocent, you can go back. But if you want to switch to say that he's guilty, you don't go back. So how are we going to teach the Mishnah now? You have to say that the teach there is similar to what we're saying by dinim mamanis. So machzir and lischos ve'ein machzir and l'chayva. When the Mishnah says that you go back to now make him innocent, but you don't go back to now make him guilty, what does it mean? Machzir and lischos. So you're not going to say it like this. The teach of going back and making him innocent means schos gereidese. It's a case where it's an innocence that affects only him and it doesn't affect anybody else. Meaning, let's say it's a kind of case where he was Machal Shabbos or he did another Aveda, where it's a question if he's Chayiv Misa or not, but it doesn't affect anybody else, whether it's a Schus, whether a Chayva, it affects only him. So over here the Mishnah is saying, if this is a case that affects only him, and you want to go back on the guilty verdict, and you want to say that now that he's innocent, you can go back. Now what does it mean when it says, Ve'ein machzirin l'chayva? You don't go back if it's a chayva, if it's something that it's going to be guilty. So if you want to compare the pshat here to what it says before by dinim mamanis, that we're really all talking about the same case. It's also a case where you want to make him innocent now. Elamai, what it's saying is, l'zuchos shehi chayva. If it's a case where you want to make him innocent now, however, making him innocent, that he's not going to be chayiv misa, will be something which is going to be negative for someone else, then you can't go back on the psak din and make him innocent. That's what it has to mean. Just like by Dinei Mamonos we said, when it says the terms chus and chayiv in the Mishnah, it means one thing, that he's going to be innocent and the other person is losing out of this. Over here you have to say by Dinei Nefashos, it also means a similar thing, that he's going to be innocent and someone else is losing out of this. For the Gemara, how could you translate this way regarding chayiv misa? Chayiv seideman. Who exactly is losing out from this if you're making this person innocent when after you paskin that he's chayiv misa, now you're saying he's not, who's losing out of this? So the Gemara says, Holei Kashi, no, this is actually not a question on the Pshat of Rav Chisda, because I can tell you, if it's a murderer and there's a close relative that wants to see justice served, that this person should get his punishment, and now you're going back on the verdict, and he's going to be innocent, and he's not going to get his Chiv Misa, there's a Goyal Adam that's losing out from this. He sees that justice is not being served. That's what it means. So in such a case, as the Gemara, you're not going to go back on the verdict. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, the question is, how's that possible? Mishum chayvsei de goyel adam katlinen leila hai. Are you telling me that in a case where you have a ritzeach that was found to be guilty, you were going to give him misa, then you realize that he's really innocent, but because there's a goyel adam that's losing out, that he feels bad about the fact that this murderer is not getting misa, therefore we're going to give this person misa even though we now see that he's really innocent? How can you say such a thing? That just because of a goyel adam, we're not going to give him his chiv misa. So you can't put this piddish that we said by Dinei Mamonos into what it says over here, the lashon of schus and chayve by Dinei Nefashos. That's one question on Rav Chisda's answer. Another problem is, according to Rav Chisda, so how did he explain it by Dinei Mamonos? Over there he explained when it said schus and chayve, it's really one thing, because what's good for one, it's a favor for one, is a loss for the other. But the question is, my bain. Why does it say bein l'schus, bein l'chayva? According to him, it's one thing. It's a schus for one person, which is a chayva for another. Why does he use the term bein? Says the Gemara Kashya. So taka, this remains a question on Rav Chisda's pshat.
We can just say that it's in the case that someone's mechayiv misa, but since he's mechayiv misa, he doesn't have to pay.
I'm not sure where you're going. Okay, so the Gemara now gets stuck in this detail here, according to Rav Chisda. But now the Gemara actually brings Ravina here is not saying his own pshat. Ravina here is going to come and give an explanation for Rav Chisda's pshat. How did this whole discussion of Rav Chisda's pshat begin? Because Rav Chisda said the distinction between our Mishnah and the Mishnah in Bechayris is, it depends if the Bezdin nosav and notl v'nosam biyad. If Bezdin went with their own hands and took the money from one person to another, that gives a very big strength to the psak din, and we don't go back on that. That's the Mishnah in Bechayris. Over here, it's talking about that he did not go back. So what was the problem the Gemara had in that? How about if you said that the person is potter? In a case of saying that the person is potter, what kind of action is there biyad? That Bezdin didn't do anything. So Ravin is coming to answer that detail, and therefore the whole continued discussion, we won't have any question here. It's good because the answer is, even when Bezdin paskin that someone is potter, it's possible that Bezdin did take money by hand. How? For example, a person borrowed money and he owed money to someone, or there was an argument about this, and Bezdin says, you're potter from paying. But the thing is, the lender had a collateral, he had a mashkin that you gave him. So now because Bezdin paskin you potter, Bezdin went and took that mashkin from the lender and gave it back to the borrower. So even when Bezdin is saying you potter, there is an example here where Bezdin went and took something by hand, and therefore that's a psak din that you can't go back on. And that's what the Mishnah in Bechayris is speaking about. Now, Ravina here goes on to explain the rest of the Mishnah in Bechayris, because there are other cases there in that Mishnah as well, and in each one of the cases that the Mishnah says there has to be a case where Bezdin did something physically by hand, and therefore we don't go back on the psak din. So what's the other cases there? Timeh sator. The Mishnah says that if the Bezdin paskin and they made something that's supposed to be tar, they made it tomei. So it's not just words; it means an action. The agibei sheretz. The Bezdin wanted to prove that their psak din is so right that the Bezdin went and put a sheretz, put a creeping thing that makes it tomei onto the food, onto the produce, and therefore Bezdin now they by hand caused the tumah. When it turns out later that you want to change the psak din, that maybe it's really tired, once Bezdin does an action and they put a sheretz on it, that's an action that you don't go back on. Or the other case that it says, Tir esatome, when Bezdin said that these fruits, that were Tomei, and the Bezdin paskin that it's Tahir, what did the Bezdin do in action? She'evim ben Pereisa. Bezdin went and mixed it amongst all the other fruits there, just to prove, to show that it's really all Tahir. And really what happened? Because Bezdin did that, this Peri was really Tomei, it makes everything Tomei. So, but because Bezdin did an action by hand, you don't go back on the Psaktin of the Bezdin. Okay, and then like I said before, the Mishnah before, the Gemara explains when Bezdin will be responsible for this, when not. It depends if he's a mumche or not. Okay, this is the conclusion of this sugya. This is the sugya where you see about a Bezdin that made a mistake. There's, as you see here, many different opinions. There's a huge discussion in Rishayim and Achrayim and Paiskim, like which of the opinions of the answers of the Gemara do you paskin, and benegayet psaktin halacha b'payil, when Bezdin makes a mistake, when you do go back, when you don't go back. There's a lot of different details about this, as you see. Okay, going to the next case of the Mishnah, it says dina nefashos chulu, when it comes to capital punishment. So over here, in such a case, you only go back if you want to make him innocent. If you want to make him guilty, you don't go back on the psaktin. Ton Rabbanon, so Nabraisi, we learned the source for this. Minayin liyatzmi bezdin chayiv. How do you know a person that came out of the bezdin chayiv, guilty? And this is regarding capital punishment. V'ama echad, and someone comes forward and says, Yeshli l'lamadol of schus, I can show something, a merit for him that he's innocent. Minayin shemechzirin I. How do I know that I bring him back to the bezdin? Talmud loima, the pasuk says, Noki al tarik, a person that's really clean, you can't kill him. So now that you have someone that says that he's really Noki, so you have to go back. How do you know the reverse is also true? A person that came out of the bezdin innocent. Someone comes along and says that I can show that he's really guilty and he's chayiv misa. How do we know? I don't bring it back to the bezdin. Talmud loimar. There's another pasuk here. It's the same pasuk there. It says v'noki v'tzadik, and it says tzadik al tarik. That someone that's a tzaddik, he's righteous, you should not kill. Why does it say two terms, a noki and a tzaddik? Tzaddik means even if he's not actually a tzaddik, but he was righteous in the din. Once Bezdin paskin that he was vindicated in the psak din, we don't go back on that regarding a chiyuv misa. Amar Rav Shimi bar Ashi, so Rav Shimi bar Ashi said about this, v'chilufa, the reverse of this is lamesis, is when it comes to a person that's persuading others to serve Avodah Zareh. Here we're very stringent with him. That if he came out to be guilty, and then someone wants to now say that he's innocent, we don't go back on a guilty psak din. And the same in the reverse, if he came out to be innocent and someone says that he's guilty, we will dafka go back and make him guilty. The chsiv, because there the pasuk says, lo sachmoil, v'lo sachas salav. It says both of these expressions don't have any mercy in him, don't cover up for him. So therefore, in both cases, we're going to be stringent on him. Rav Kahana learned, or he learned it out from where it says Michi Horek Tahargenu. It says a double expression regarding this individual, Ki Horek Tahargenu. So therefore, we learn from this that in either way you have to be machmer on him and give him the chiyuv misa. Rab Zeira asked Rav Sheshes the shaila, based on what we said, that by dina nefashis you don't go back on a psak din that he's innocent. Chayve golius minayin, or chayve golius mai. What's the halacha regarding a person that the psak din was that he killed someone b'sheigig and therefore he's going to have to go to golus? Do I consider this to be a case of din nefashis, where the same halacha will apply, that once he's made innocent, we don't go back and make him guilty, or not? It says the Gemara, Asye ritzeach ritzeach. We learn out gzeir shave by a ritzeach that was bemazed deliberately, so we don't go back. And it also says the term ritzeach regarding someone that has to go into galus. It says lonus shama ritzeach, just like it says there yomus ritzeach. So it's the same thing, and you don't go back. Chayav malkiyas mai. What's the halacha of someone that there was a psak din for lashes? In such a case, is it similar to din nefashis or not? Here as well, there's gzeir shava asya rasha rasha. It says the term rasha ashur rasha lamos, and it says by malchus v'hoyim bin akaisa rasha. So we compare the two, that it's the same halacha that once he's innocent, you don't go back and make him guilty, and once he's guilty, if someone says he has something to say innocent about him, you do go back. Tanya Nami Yachi, we learned this in his brayse as well. Chayav golius minayin asya ritzeach ritzeach. Chayav malchus minayin asya rasha rasha. Exactly like Rav Shesha said. Okay, one more thing. We go in the Mishnah. It said ve'ein machzirin l'chayva, that we don't go back to make him guilty now. Once the halacha was paskin regarding adin nefashis that he's innocent. Amar Rab Chia bar Abba, Amar Rab Yechanan, there's an exception for this, because v'hu shata b'davish ena tzedukim meidim bait. This is only if the mistake of the bezdin was regarding a matter that even tzedaikim that only took what it says clearly in the pasuk and did not follow what the chachamim said. So if it's something that is the tzedaikim are not made to this because it's not clearly in the pasuk, and that's what the mistake was regarding, Here I say that you don't go back on the psak din by din nefashis. But if the mistake was made regarding something which is a clear matter written in the pasuk, so then even by din nefashis you have to go back on this psak din, because zil kri beiravu. This is something that you can even go to little children in the cheder and they'll tell you, look in the chumash, this is what it says. So there's no psak din here at all. You have to go back on the psak din. So now based on this, so if so, how about a case regarding isnus, an inappropriate relationship? Are we going to say that if there was a mistake in the psak din regarding the chi of misa for such a forbidden relationship, so should this be considered something which is clear in the pasuk, and therefore you can't go back on this? So Rashi explains what he was asking him. What he was saying was, when it comes to a case of a ritzeyach, there it's much more complicated. If there was a mistake made, it's not necessarily something which is mefurish in the pasuk. And Rashi gives a few examples. Rashi says, for example, you have to assess, a person dies because you threw a rock and you killed this person. So now you have to assess this rock that was thrown, is it able to kill him? Is it not able to kill him? Another thing you have to assess is the warning, the hasra. Who gave the hasra? Did the Adam give the hasra? Did someone else give the hasra? Another thing you have to assess, was he being chased? Was he being threatened by the other person? Was it self-defense? Was it not self-defense? So it becomes complicated. So that's by Aritzeach. So over there, if there was a mistake made, it's not necessarily something which is mefurish in the pasuk, and therefore we can understand why you won't go back on the psak din. However, by a noiv and a yafes, by a case of a forbidden relationship where you don't have all these complications, so over there seemingly the halacha should be that if you paskin wrong, you should have to go back because it's clear the isser in the pasuk. So Amalei, Rabbi Yechanan answered him, Adamoiktech yakid, when your fire is still burning, zil kutz karech v'tzali, cut off the gourd and roast it. Meaning he was telling him that once you're involved in the sugya and you hear the halacha that I told you and you're giving me an example for where this halacha that I told you that if it's a kribe rav that you will go back on the psak din, this is a good example and it's taka true. That was the expression that he was telling him. In other words, he agreed to the point that he was making that by noyev and noyefes, then this is clear. You're going to have to go back on the psak din. It menami Omer Rabbi Ami Omer Rabbi Yechanan. We also learned that Rabbi Ami said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Ta b'noyev chayzer. A case where the mistake of the bezin was regarding a noyev. It's a clear thing that he's chayiv misa. It's in the pasuk. So therefore, this is something you have to go back on. The Gemara still asks, but the Mishnah said that regarding a chiyav misa, if bezin made a mistake and they made him innocent, you don't go back on this. So how do we apply that regarding the case of forbidden relationships? There has to be a case where even by noyev and ayefes, where this applies as well. There is a case. If the mistake was beniged to this, that bezin said that the reason why the person is going to be innocent is because the relationship was shalei kedarka in an abnormal manner, and therefore they made him pater. And this is really his chayiv, but this is not something which is mefurish in the pasuk. It's a limud from a drasha of mishkevei isha loshen rabim. So this is something that the tzedukah are not moedim by. That's the case where the bezin will not go back on the psak din of innocence regarding this kind of aveda, because it's not mefurish in the pasuk.